The thin blue line and the shadows beneath. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows over the suburban streets as Officer Derek Monroe cruised down the quiet neighborhood. His police cruiser, polished to perfection, gleamed under the fading light, reflecting the pride he took in his role as a law enforcer. A seasoned officer with nearly 2 decades of experience, Monroe carried himself with the confidence of a man who had seen it all. He believed in law and order, his law, his order. Yet, today, something felt off. A sleek black SUV sat idling near a small community park. Inside, a black woman in a tailored navy blue suit flipped through a stack of papers, seemingly lost in thought. To Monroe, the scene didn't sit right. The vehicle was too expensive, the woman too composed. The equation didn't add up in his mind. Something about her, the way she exuded control, the confidence in her posture, rubbed him the wrong way. His instincts, or rather, his prejudices, whispered, "She doesn't belong here." His grip tightened on the steering wheel. Time to check it out. Flipping on his cruiser's lights, Monroe pulled up behind the SUV. He stepped out, adjusting his belt as he approached. His palm hovered over his holstered gun, a reflex ingrained over years of policing in communities where he had grown to see unfamiliar faces as potential threats. Inside the SUV, Special Agent Maya Carter sighed as the flashing lights reflected off her rearview mirror. Of all days, not today. She had spent the last several months entrenched in one of the toughest corruption cases her division had ever handled, and today was supposed to be her one day off. A brief respite before diving back into the abyss of police misconduct cases. As the head of the city's Internal Affairs Division, Maya had seen it all: cops cutting corners, planting evidence, using their badge as a shield against accountability. But one thing remained constant. When the walls started closing in, they always tried to intimidate her. Calmly, she set her sandwich aside, adjusted her blazer, and reached for her badge. The game was about to begin. An encounter written in bias. License and registration. The demand was immediate, sharp, impersonal. No greeting, no introduction. Maya rolled down her window, her dark eyes locking onto the officer's face. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the hardened expression of a man who expected obedience. His jaw was clenched, his hand still resting near his weapon. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice steady, professional. "License and registration," Monroe repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maya didn't move right away. Instead, she studied him. The way his gaze flickered between her and the car, the way his fingers twitched at his belt. He was already convinced she was trouble. With deliberate slowness, she reached into her glove compartment and retrieved the documents. She handed them over, her expression unreadable. Monroe glanced at the registration and frowned. "This car doesn't match." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't match what, exactly?" "Step out of the vehicle," Monroe ordered, his tone laced with irritation. Maya's jaw tightened. She knew what was happening. This wasn't about a traffic violation. This was about control. "And why exactly do I need to step out?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Monroe's fingers twitched again, this time around the grip of his holstered firearm. "Step out. Now." A cold silence stretched between them. Finally, Maya exhaled slowly. Fine. If he wanted to play this game, she'd let him. Opening the door, she stepped out with deliberate grace. Her heels clicked against the asphalt as she stood to her full height. Nowhere near as tall as Monroe, but the way she carried herself made the height difference irrelevant. Monroe narrowed his eyes. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." Maya didn't move. Instead, she reached into her blazer pocket. Monroe reacted instantly, his hand flying to his gun. "Don't move another inch," he barked, his voice cracking slightly. Maya froze, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Then, ever so carefully, she pulled out her ID badge and held it up. The golden insignia of the Internal Affairs Division gleamed in the dying sunlight. Her voice, now sharp and commanding, cut through the tension. Special Agent Maya Carter, head of Internal Affairs. The color drained from Monroe's face. "Wait. What?" he stammered, his confidence cracking. Maya took a step closer, eyes locked onto his. "Did you just racially profile me, Officer Monroe?" she asked, her voice slicing through the charged air like a scalpel. The moment of truth. I was just following protocol," Monroe stammered, struggling to regain control of the situation. Maya let out a mirthless chuckle. "Really? Because it sure looks to me like you stopped someone based on the color of their skin and the car they were driving." Monroe opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "And tell me," Maya continued, "have you already run my plates, or were you planning on fabricating a reason to justify this stop?" A flicker of hesitation passed over Monroe's face. "Gotcha." Just then, another squad car pulled up behind Monroe's. The driver stepped out, a tall, middle-aged black man in uniform, his posture stiff with professionalism. "Officer Monroe, what's going on here?" Sergeant David Langley asked, his voice calm but firm. Before Monroe could answer, Maya spoke first. She held up her badge once more, making sure Langley got a good look at it. "Special Agent Maya Carter, Internal Affairs," she stated. "Your officer just racially profiled me." Langley's eyes darkened as he turned to Monroe. "Is that true?" I thought the vehicle looked suspicious," Monroe muttered. Langley's jaw clenched. "That's not a justification." Maya stepped even closer to Monroe, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Do you want to keep going with this, officer, or should we call your captain right now?" Monroe took a step back, his bravado crumbling. He looked to Langley for support, but the sergeant merely shook his head. Maya's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "That's what I thought." Langley cleared his throat, looking at Maya. "Agent Carter, I apologize for this." "Apologies aren't enough," she interrupted, her voice like steel. "I'll be filing a formal complaint, and I suggest you start pulling your department's records, because something tells me Officer Monroe isn't the only problem here." Langley nodded solemnly. "Understood." As Monroe slinked back toward his squad car, Maya watched him go, her instincts buzzing. This wasn't just about one racist cop. This was bigger. Much bigger. She could feel it. And she wasn't about to let it slide. Unveiling the Hydra. Maya Carter leaned back in her office chair, staring at the glowing screen in front of her. The city skyline stretched behind her through the glass windows, but she wasn't looking at the view. Her mind was far from the gleaming lights and skyscrapers. The encounter with Officer Monroe had only been a spark, but she knew that fire ran deep. Corruption, unchecked authority, and systemic misconduct weren't isolated problems in law enforcement. They were a hydra, with countless heads, each one rearing itself the moment another was cut off. And if there was one thing Maya had learned over the years, it was that when you start poking the beast, it bites back. Her phone buzzed. A message from Detective Alan Rucker, her most trusted investigator. "Rucker, you were right. Monroe is just the surface. We need to talk." She exhaled and ran a hand through her curls before grabbing her coat. Time to dig deeper. The pattern in the darkness. The war room was a stark contrast to the sleek offices of Internal Affairs. It was a place of hard truths. Walls filled with case files, a massive digital board displaying precinct maps, complaint records, and flagged names. Maya entered to find Rucker already there, arms crossed, tension radiating off him. Lisa Tran, their best forensic analyst, was leaning over a computer screen. "What have we got?" Maya asked, setting her bag down. Rucker tapped the digital board, where a series of red dots marked complaints filed against District 12, Officer Monroe's precinct. "These are just the complaints filed in the past 2 years," he said. 83 cases of excessive force, racial profiling, and falsified reports. Lisa swiped the screen, revealing the secondary report. But here's where it gets interesting, she added. Of those 83 complaints, guess how many actually led to disciplinary action? Maya didn't even need to guess. Let me guess. 0. Lisa nodded grimly. 0 official actions, Maya. But look closer at who signed off on each of these cases. Maya stepped forward. A familiar name stared back at her. Sergeant Brandon Ellis, a veteran officer, well-liked by his superiors, and one of the most respected names in the precinct. To the public, he was a pillar of law enforcement. To Maya, he was a gatekeeper, ensuring corruption never saw the light of day. Ellis has buried every single case involving Monroe. And guess what else? Lisa continued. It's not just Monroe. There's a pattern. Maya's stomach clenched as Lisa zoomed in. A network of names emerged, like a spiderweb. Monroe was just a pawn. Ellis was the enforcer. And behind him, Chief Dale Mathers, the real architect. Maya leaned forward, her fingers tightening into a fist. Mathers had been in power for almost 2 decades, an old-school cop who had survived every scandal, every investigation. He had built a system where misconduct wasn't punished, it was rewarded. She inhaled sharply. This isn't just about Monroe. This is an organized operation. Rucker nodded. And we just found proof that Ellis and Mathers have been protecting not just officers, but criminal operations tied to city politics. Lisa pulled up another file, a financial report. Look at this. Funds being funneled through community policing programs. Except they never reach the programs. Instead, they disappear into shell accounts that are linked to a company, Grayson Development Corp. Maya's head snapped up. Wait. Grayson is in. Jacob Grayson, the chief's brother. Lisa gave her a grim nod. Bingo. The Untouchables. Maya sat in stunned silence for a long moment. It was worse than she had imagined. She had been prepared for misconduct, excessive force cases, and abuse of power. But this was a criminal enterprise, a pipeline of power stretching from dirty cops like Monroe, up to Ellis, then even higher, to the very man running the police department. Mathers had turned his precinct into a machine. And if his brother's real estate company was involved, that meant this was bigger than just law enforcement. Maya turned to Rucker. We need to move. Now. A dangerous game begins. The next morning, Maya pulled every file she had and marched straight to Chief Dale Mathers' office. She wasn't stupid. Mathers was too powerful to take down with a single complaint. But she needed to see his reaction. She entered his office without knocking, setting a thick file on his desk. Mathers was a large man, graying at the temples but still carrying the presence of an old-school enforcer. He barely glanced up from his papers. Agent Carter, to what do I owe the pleasure? He asked, his voice smooth. Maya leaned in, lowering her voice. You and I both know what's happening in District 12. Mathers finally looked at her. His expression was unreadable. I don't know what you're talking about, he said flatly. Maya smirked. Sure you do, she said, because your name is all over the cover-ups. Mathers exhaled through his nose. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You should be careful, Carter. IA agents who dig too deep sometimes find themselves in dangerous situations. Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her face cold. That almost sounds like a threat, Chief. Mathers chuckled. It's just friendly advice, he said. Maya's smile vanished. Then let me give you some advice in return, she said, her voice now ice. I don't scare easily. Mathers didn't answer, but his fingers tapped his desk, just twice. It was a subtle signal, but Maya understood it. He was already moving against her, the ticking clock. That evening, Maya received a message on her personal phone, something that almost never happened. Unknown number. You're making enemies, Carter. Walk away before it's too late. Her blood ran cold. Whoever sent the message wasn't just trying to intimidate her. They knew exactly who she was and where to reach her. She showed the message to Rucker, who frowned. "This is escalating," he muttered. "They're going to start covering their tracks." Maya inhaled sharply. "Then we need to move faster." Time was running out. The moment Mathers suspected that Internal Affairs had solid evidence, he would make sure it disappeared. Maya turned to Rucker. "We go after the money. The paper trail is what will take them down." He nodded. "I'll start pulling financial records." Maya exhaled. They were closing in. But she knew the truth. The closer they got, the deadlier the game would become. The trap tightens. The night air was heavy with an impending storm as Maya Carter sat in her office, the dim glow of her desk lamp illuminating the stacks of files before her. The scent of old paper and ink mixed with the faint aroma of stale coffee, a testament to the sleepless nights she had spent dissecting the labyrinth of corruption. The warning text still lingered in her mind. "Unknown number. You're making enemies, Carter. Walk away before it's too late." She had received threats before. It came with the job. But this was different. This wasn't just about intimidation. This was a promise. Mathers was moving, and she had a sinking feeling that if she didn't act soon, she'd be the one buried under fabricated charges or worse. She'd disappear entirely. The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. She glanced at the large evidence board pinned against her wall. The names, photos, and financial records were connected by red strings, forming a web of deceit that traced back to Chief Dale Mathers, Sergeant Brandon Ellis, Officer Derek Monroe, and real estate mogul Jacob Grayson. They had created an ecosystem of power, a system where officers like Monroe were protected as long as they played their role, harassing and intimidating certain communities, ensuring Grayson Development Corp. Could sweep in and buy land at dirt-cheap prices. Mathers controlled the precinct. Ellis buried the complaints. Grayson made millions off the suffering. And Monroe. He was just one of the many hounds used to enforce their empire. Maya leaned back, exhaling slowly. Tonight was the night they made their move, but she would be ready. A meeting in the shadows. At exactly 11:45 p.m., Maya parked her unmarked car in a dimly lit alley on the outskirts of the city. The meeting place was a rundown diner, the neon OPN 24 HOUR's sign flickering erratically. It was the kind of place people came to when they didn't want to be seen. Inside, Detective Luis Ortega, one of the few honest men left in Mathers' precinct, was already seated at a corner booth, a cup of untouched coffee before him. Maya slid into the seat across from him. "You're late," Ortega muttered, his fingers drumming against the table. His eyes darted around the nearly empty diner. "You're nervous," she observed. He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Nervous doesn't even begin to cover it, Carter." Maya didn't respond. She simply reached into her coat, pulling out a small recorder and pressing play. A grainy voice crackled through the speaker. "She's getting too close. The case needs to disappear. And if she doesn't back off, then she disappears too." Ortega tensed. "Where the hell did you get that?" Maya leaned in. "Your friend in forensics intercepted an encrypted message. This was between Mathers and Grayson. Yesterday." Ortega exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "Christ. They're not even hiding it anymore. They think I won't act fast enough." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That's why I need your help." Ortega shook his head. "Carter, I came to this meeting because I respect what you do, but I have a family. If they find out I helped you, they won't find out." Maya cut in. "But if we don't stop this, it won't end. You think your family is safe now. The second Mathers decides you're a liability, you'll be the next one to disappear." Ortega was silent. Finally, he exhaled. "What do you need from me?" Maya slid a flash drive across the table. Inside are leaked transaction records from Grayson's company. Documents showing direct kickbacks to Mathers and Ellis in exchange for precinct protection. Ortega's eyes widened. "Jesus, if this is real." "It is. He swallowed hard. And you want me to leak this? Maya shook her head. Not yet. First, I need you to find out if Mathers has any weak points. If we take him down, we need to be sure he can't pull any last-minute tricks. Ortega nodded. Understood. Maya stood up, throwing a few bills onto the table. One last thing, she said, turning back. Be careful. They're watching all of us now. The first blow. At 7:00 a.m. the next morning, Maya walked into City Hall. She wasn't here for a routine investigation. She was here to meet the district attorney. DA James Holloway was a shrewd man, well known for his no-nonsense approach to high-profile cases. He had seen his fair share of scandals, but as Maya laid out the case files before him, even he looked taken aback. This is bigger than anything I expected, Holloway muttered, flipping through the records. Maya folded her arms. I want you to sign off on immediate search warrants. If we wait too long, they'll wipe everything. Holloway sighed, rubbing his temples. I can push this through, but I need to be clear on one thing. If we go after Mathers, Ellis, and Grayson at the same time, there will be fallout. Maya nodded. I know. But the sooner we move, the sooner we get ahead of their counterattack. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then he reached for his pen. Consider it done. A desperate countermove. 2 hours later, as Maya was reviewing her notes at her office, her phone rang. Unknown number. You didn't listen. Maya sat up straight. Unknown number. You should have walked away. A cold feeling crept into her chest. Before she could reply, her office door burst open. Lisa stood there, her face pale. Maya, you need to see this. She held out her phone. A news alert flashed across the screen. Breaking. Internal Affairs Agent Maya Carter under investigation for corruption allegations. Maya felt the world tilt. What the hell? Lisa's voice was tight. They flipped the script on you. Maya's mind raced. Mathers knew she was closing in, and he had struck first. Fabricated charges, a smear campaign, a desperate move from a desperate man. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Last chance, Carter. Walk away, or we'll bury you. Maya clenched her jaw, eyes burning with fury. She wasn't backing down. If Mathers wanted a war, he had just declared one. And Maya never lost. The fall before the rise. The storm had begun. Maya Carter sat in her dimly lit office, the glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows over the stacks of evidence piled on her desk. But for the first time in her career, she was the one being investigated. Her name was plastered all over the news. Breaking. Internal Affairs Agent Maya Carter under investigation for corruption allegations. Scandal in the IA department. Is Carter targeting officers for personal gain? The headlines were everywhere. The smear campaign was in full effect. Maya leaned back in her chair, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. Chief Mathers had flipped the script on her. She had been building a case against him and his empire. But in a calculated move, he had gone public first. Fabricated evidence, false accusations, a weaponized media. This wasn't just an attempt to discredit her. This was an execution. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. We warned you, Carter. Now you burn. She exhaled, gripping the phone so tight her knuckles turned white. This was war now, and she wasn't going down without a fight. The art of war. At exactly 3:00 p.m., Maya walked into the district attorney's office. DA James Holloway was already standing by his window, watching the city skyline, as if the answers were hidden in its concrete jungle. When he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. You've got a problem, he said simply. Maya dropped a thick file onto his desk. No, I have proof. Holloway sighed, rubbing his temples. Mathers just called me an hour ago. He claims you've been abusing your authority, fabricating charges against good officers for political gain. Maya smirked. And you believe him? Holloway shook his head. No, but it's not about what I believe. It's about public perception. Right now, Mathers is winning. Maya leaned forward, her voice razor-sharp. He's playing dirty. I need to hit back harder. Holloway studied her for a long moment. All right. What do you have? Maya tapped the file. Grayson Development Corp., real estate fraud. Police involvement in forced evictions. Payments funneled to Mathers through Ellis. You give me search warrants, and I'll give you the case of the decade. Holloway hesitated. Maya, you understand that if this goes wrong, you're done. Maya's eyes burned with determination. If I don't do this, I'm done anyway. Holloway exhaled, then reached for his pen. I'll get you your warrants. Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. The game had changed. Now, it was her turn to play dirty. A dangerous gamble. That night, Maya met with her most trusted ally, Detective Alan Rucker. They sat in an unmarked car, parked outside a dimly lit warehouse on the docks. You sure about this? Rucker asked, watching the building. Inside, their mole was waiting. I don't have a choice, Maya said, tightening her coat against the cold. Mathers hit me with a public attack. If I don't strike back, I'm finished. Rucker sighed. All right, let's do this. They stepped out of the car and approached the warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and metal. The dim overhead lights flickered as they walked between towering storage crates. Then, a shadow moved. Agent Carter, a familiar voice greeted. Luis Ortega, a sergeant from Mathers precinct, and the only cop on the inside who was willing to talk. Maya narrowed her eyes. Do you have it? Ortega exhaled, then handed her a USB drive. It's all here, he muttered. Audio recordings of Mathers and Ellis discussing payouts, a file on Grayson's real estate schemes. Everything. Maya took the drive carefully. You just risked your career for this, she said. Ortega chuckled dryly. No, I just saved my soul. Maya slipped the drive into her coat. Get out of town. Tonight. Mathers will figure out you flipped. Ortega nodded. Then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The night everything changed. At midnight, Maya sat in the war room of Internal Affairs, the USB drive plugged into her laptop. Lisa and Rucker were with her, their faces illuminated by the screen's glow. And then they heard it. The smoking gun. Audio file 1. Mathers. Ellis, make sure the body cam footage is wiped. We can't have another IA inquiry. Ellis. What about the Carter situation? Mathers. I'll handle it. She won't be a problem much longer. A chill ran down Maya's spine. Audio file 2. Grayson. We got the cops in our pocket. Keep pushing people out of those neighborhoods, and my people will handle the rest. Ellis. And what about the media? Grayson. We control the headlines. We can turn anyone into a criminal. Even Carter. Lisa sucked in a breath. They set you up before you even started investigating them. Maya clenched her jaw. This is it, she whispered. We take this to Holloway tonight. Rucker nodded. Let's move. But just as Maya grabbed the drive, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. We warned you, Carter. Check the news. Maya's stomach twisted. She clicked the TV remote. The screen flickered on. Breaking any audios. Internal Affairs Agent Carter tied to illegal bribery case. Evidence found in her apartment. Maya's blood went ice cold. What the hell? Lisa gasped. Maya grabbed her phone, quickly dialing her home security system's camera feed. And there, clear as day, was footage of 2 masked men planting files and cash inside her apartment. Rucker cursed. They're framing you. Maya's vision blurred with rage. Mathers had just played his final card. He wasn't just discrediting her. He was setting her up to take the fall. If she didn't move right now, she'd be the one behind bars. Her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. You should have walked away. Maya's hands trembled with fury. She looked at Rucker and Lisa. We need to run this evidence to Holloway. Now. Rucker nodded. Let's go. They grabbed everything. The files, the USB drive, their weapons. This wasn't just about taking Mathers down anymore. This was about survival. Maya knew that before the night was over, someone was going to jail. The only question was, would it be her or Mathers? The walls were closing in. Maya Carter could feel it in her bones. The police force, the media, even the district attorney's office, they were all watching her, waiting for her next move. She was no longer just investigating corruption. She was the target. Her apartment had been compromised. Her name was being dragged through the mud. And now, with the evidence she held, she was racing against time to bring down Mathers and his empire before they buried her first. Her heart pounded as she, Rucker, and Lisa gathered their files, stuffing them into bags. The air in the Internal Affairs war room was thick with tension. Lisa's face was pale as she stared at the security footage on Maya's laptop, showing masked men breaking into Maya's home, planting files, and stuffing cash into her drawers. "They set you up like a damn movie villain," Lisa whispered. Maya clenched her fists. "Yeah, well, I'm about to rewrite the script. No safe haven." Bang, bang, bang. A loud pounding on the office door made everyone freeze. A deep voice barked, "Agent Carter, open up. This is the police." Maya's stomach dropped. Lisa's hands shook. "Shit, they're here." Rucker cursed under his breath. "They're moving faster than we expected." Maya whipped her head around, scanning the war room. They had minutes, if that. She reached for the USB drive and quickly shoved it into a hidden compartment inside her watch, a custom-made, high-security device designed for undercover agents. Then she grabbed her phone and pulled up a backup exit plan on the building schematics. Fire escape. Back entrance. "Move, now," she ordered. Lisa grabbed her laptop, stuffing it into her bag. Rucker holstered his gun. Bang, bang, bang. "Last warning, Carter. We have a warrant for your arrest. Open the damn door." Maya gritted her teeth. Arrest? No. She wasn't about to let them drag her out like some criminal when she was the only one fighting for justice. She signaled Rucker and Lisa. "Go now." Lisa ran first, bolting down the emergency stairwell. Rucker followed. Maya took one last look at the war room. This was where it had all started, and if she played her cards right, it wouldn't end here. Then she turned and ran. The escape. The fire escape door burst open, and Maya sprinted down the metal staircase, her boots hitting each step with precision. Behind her, sirens blared as squad cars swarmed the precinct. Lisa was already by the getaway car, a stolen, unregistered vehicle they had parked for emergencies. Rucker slid into the driver's seat. Go, go, go. Maya barely had time to slam the door shut before Rucker peeled out of the alleyway, tires screeching against the pavement. In the rearview mirror, she saw officers storming into the building, their weapons drawn. But they were too late. Maya was gone. The last safe house. 20 minutes later, they arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city, one of Rucker's old safe houses. The place smelled like dust and rusted metal, but it was secure. Maya slammed her bag onto a crate and pulled out her laptop. Lisa was already hacking into police records, tracking the arrest warrant. "They filed charges against you 2 hours ago," Lisa muttered. "Bribery. Conspiracy. Evidence tampering." Maya rolled her eyes. They'd really went all out. Lisa swallowed hard. "Maya, they're making sure you can't walk away from this." Maya's jaw tightened. Then she opened the USB drive files and pulled up the audio recordings, financial statements, and the case files connecting Mathers, Hellas, and Grayson. Rucker stood behind her, arms crossed. "This is enough to destroy them," he muttered. "But you need to get it out fast." Maya nodded. She pulled out her phone and dialed the only person left who could help her. The call that changed everything. James Holloway, district attorney. The phone rang once, then twice. Then, click. Carter. Holloway's voice was low, cautious. Where the hell are you? Maya didn't waste time. I have the proof. All of it. Silence. Then Holloway's voice dropped even lower. Do you understand the storm you're about to unleash? Maya gritted her teeth. They set me up, Holloway. They think they've won. A pause. Then, meet me in 1 hour. The courthouse. Back entrance. Click. Maya stared at the phone. Lisa exhaled. You think he's still on our side? Maya didn't answer, because she wasn't sure anymore. The courthouse meeting. 1 hour later, under the cover of darkness, Maya, Rucker, and Lisa approached the back entrance of the courthouse. Holloway was already there, waiting. He looked tired, like he had aged 10 years overnight. You really did it, he muttered, staring at the USB drive Maya handed him. Maya nodded. It's all there. The money laundering, the evictions, the body cam evidence. Enough to bury them. Holloway ran a hand through his graying hair. This is going to set the city on fire, Carter. Maya's voice was ice cold. Good. He exhaled. All right. I'll get a judge to sign emergency warrants. We're raiding Mathers, Ellis, and Grayson. Tonight. Rucker grinned. About damn time. Lisa was already on her laptop. I'll start pushing the evidence to the press. If we control the headlines, they won't be able to spin this. Holloway nodded. Then he turned to Maya. You know they're still coming for you, right? He asked. Even if we arrest them, their allies will want revenge. Maya smirked. Let them come. The takedown begins. 11:30 p.m. The police convoy moved in silence. Squad cars, SWAT vans, unmarked units. The orders were clear. Sweep everything. Chief Mathers' home. Sergeant Ellis' office. Jacob Grayson's corporate tower. No one leaves. No one gets a warning. Maya sat inside an armored SUV, watching it all unfold on live surveillance feeds. We have a visual on Ellis. Moving in. SWAT in position outside Grayson's penthouse, preparing for breach. Mathers is resisting. Officers engaging. Maya's heartbeat pounded as the screen showed SWAT teams moving into Mathers' mansion. They dragged him out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. And finally, Maya Carter exhaled. Justice was coming. And she had just delivered it. The empire crumbles. The storm had broken. Across the city, sirens wailed. Blue and red lights flashed against the dark sky as squad cars and SWAT vans roared through the streets, converging on 3 locations: the home of Chief Dale Mathers, the downtown office of Jacob Grayson, and the personal headquarters of Sergeant Brandon Ellis. Maya Carter sat in the command van, her heart hammering as she listened to the radio feeds pouring in. Target 1 in custody. Mathers is down. Ellis is resisting. Officers engaging now. Grayson's security is blocking access, requesting backup. Rucker sat beside her, gripping the edge of the console. Lisa's fingers flew over the keyboard, monitoring live feeds from street cameras and drone surveillance. Maya exhaled slowly. This was the moment they had been building toward. Months of investigation, lies, corruption, and threats. All of it came down to this. Her enemies were being dragged out in cuffs. But she wasn't celebrating yet, because she knew better. People like Mathers never go down without a fight. The last stand of Sergeant Ellis. At Ellis' office, officers had broken down the doors and flooded in. But Ellis wasn't going quietly. Gunfire erupted, sending officers ducking for cover. Shit, he's armed. Inside the building, Ellis had barricaded himself in his office, a loaded shotgun in his hands. You think you can take me? His voice roared from inside. You think you can take down a real cop? I've bled for this city. I made this department. The SWAT team leader raised his rifle. Sergeant Ellis, Drop your weapon and step out." Ellis let out a bitter laugh. "You don't get it, do you?" he snarled. "The city doesn't belong to people like you. It belongs to the ones willing to do what's necessary." Maya listened through her earpiece, her stomach twisting. He's not going to surrender. "Go non-lethal," she ordered. Seconds later, a SWAT officer fired a flashbang grenade through the broken window. Boom! A white-hot burst of light and sound filled the office, disorienting Ellis. Within moments, the SWAT team breached the door, tackling him to the ground. "Get your hands off me," Ellis roared, thrashing violently. But he was done. Sergeant Brandon Ellis was in cuffs, and Maya finally allowed herself to breathe. The fall of a titan. Jacob Grayson's arrest. While Ellis fought like a cornered dog, Jacob Grayson was a different kind of predator. He wasn't violent. He didn't raise a gun. He fought with lawyers, money, and influence. When the police arrived at his penthouse, his private security blocked the elevators. "Mr. Grayson is unavailable for questioning," one of his lawyers said, stepping in front of the officers. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is private property." The lead officer held up a signed federal warrant. "Not anymore." The security team hesitated. Then, before anyone could react, Grayson walked out himself. He was calm, dressed in a tailored suit, adjusting his cuffs like he was about to close a business deal. "Ah, gentlemen, I was wondering when you'd show up." He smiled, as if this was all a misunderstanding. "I assume there's been a mistake," he asked smoothly. Maya, watching through the live feed, clenched her fists. Grayson was dangerous, not because he had a gun, but because he had power. Power that he believed made him untouchable. "Jacob Grayson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice," the lead officer said, stepping forward. Grayson didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled. "Good luck proving it." Maya's stomach twisted, because she knew Grayson wasn't afraid. Which meant he still had a plan. The betrayal of Chief Mathers. Back at the command van, Maya turned her focus to the last arrest. Chief Dale Mathers. His mansion was swarming with officers, but there was no struggle. Because Mathers didn't run. He was sitting in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at an old police badge on his desk. The same badge he had used to build his empire. When the officers entered, he simply took a sip and sighed. Well, I suppose this was inevitable. No screaming, no fighting. Because Mathers wasn't a soldier like Ellis. He wasn't a businessman like Grayson. He was a chess player. And chess players didn't panic. They just moved their next piece. A deal with the devil. 12:30 a.m. Internal Affairs Holding Facility. Maya sat across from Mathers in an interrogation room. Between them sat a folder filled with evidence. Financial records, surveillance footage, wire transfers, enough to send him to prison for life. And yet, Mathers looked completely calm. He folded his hands and smirked. "You think you won, Carter," he murmured. Maya didn't blink. "I know I did." Mathers leaned forward. "Did you? Because here's what's going to happen next." He tapped the table with one finger. "Jacob Grayson will walk." Maya's stomach twisted. Mathers smiled wider. "Ellis is an idiot. He'll go to prison, sure. But Grayson? He has connections. He has money. He has an army of lawyers already working on getting him out." Maya clenched her fists. Mathers sighed, almost sympathetically. "You wanted to clean up this department, but corruption doesn't die, Carter." His eyes burned into hers. "It adapts." Silence. Maya stared at him. Then she stood up. She turned to leave. "You can't win, Carter," Mathers called after her. Maya paused at the door. Then she turned back, her eyes cold as steel. "Watch me." And then she walked out. The war wasn't over. The arrests were done. The empire had fallen. But Mathers was right. Corruption didn't die. It adapted. Jacob Grayson had 100 lawyers ready to fight. Mathers had planted seeds of doubt in the media. And Maya knew, if she didn't finish this fight, it would all start again. She turned to Lisa and Rucker. "We're not done." Rucker raised an eyebrow. "We just arrested half the city's power players." Maya exhaled. "Then it's time to take down the other half." Lisa smirked. "Dan right." Maya looked out at the city. The battle was won. But the war had just begun. Justice or survival. The city was still reeling. Within 24 hours, one of the most powerful corruption rings in law enforcement had been exposed. Chief Dale Mathers, Sergeant Brandon Ellis, business tycoon Jacob Grayson. They were all in custody. But the battle wasn't over. Because powerful men don't stay down for long. And Maya Carter knew the real fight was just beginning. The chessboard moves. 6:00 a.m. Internal Affairs Headquarters. Maya sat in a high-security interrogation room, reviewing case files. Her laptop screen flickered with surveillance footage from the night before. Mathers was locked up. Ellis had been dragged out, kicking and screaming. Grayson. His lawyers were already filing motions to dismiss his arrest. She exhaled slowly. This isn't over. Her phone buzzed. "Lisa, you need to see this. Turn on Channel 5. Now." Maya frowned and grabbed the remote. The TV screen flickered on. Breaking news. Internal Affairs Agent Carter faces scrutiny for alleged misconduct. Maya's blood ran cold. The anchor continued, her tone carefully measured. While Agent Carter has led the investigation into police corruption, anonymous sources claim she may have used unlawful tactics to secure evidence. The screen shifted, showing footage of Maya outside Mathers' mansion during the raid. The voiceover was clear. Did Carter cross the line? Did she manufacture evidence to bring down the very system she swore to protect? Maya's hands clenched into fists. Lisa appeared at the doorway, breathless. "They're flipping the script on you again." Maya exhaled sharply. "They're trying to discredit the investigation." Lisa nodded grimly. "If they spin this right, Grayson could walk. Mathers could get a deal." Rucker stormed in behind her. "This is a full-scale counterattack," he muttered. "They're pulling every string they have left." Maya closed her eyes for a moment. This wasn't just about winning the case anymore. This was about survival. A devil's bargain. 9:00 a.m. Federal Courthouse. Maya marched into the grand marble building, ignoring the swarm of reporters hurling questions at her. She wasn't here to talk. She was here to make a move. The meeting room was dimly lit, filled with the low murmur of voices. Sitting across the table, in a sharp designer suit, was Jacob Grayson's top lawyer, a woman named Vivian Knox. She adjusted her glasses and smiled coolly. Well, Agent Carter, you've been busy." Maya didn't sit. "I'm not here to play games." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Oh, but you're already in one." She slid a legal document across the table. "Grayson's lawyers are filing for an immediate dismissal of all charges, citing procedural misconduct." Maya's stomach twisted. Knox's smile widened. "You see, Agent Carter, your little crusade might have uncovered some ugly truths, but it also left you vulnerable." She leaned in. "You cut corners. You used illegal surveillance. You leaned on witnesses. You raided Mathers' home with questionable authority." Maya didn't blink. Because she knew exactly what this was. A bluff. Knox tilted her head. "But we're willing to make a deal." Maya finally spoke. "I don't make deals with criminals." Knox chuckled. "Oh, but I think you'll want to hear this one." She slid a second document forward. "This is a plea agreement for Mathers." Maya's heart stopped. Knox continued, her voice smooth as silk. "If you drop the charges against Grayson, Mathers will take full responsibility. He'll confess to corruption, obstruction, and money laundering. He'll go to prison, and you'll get your victory." Maya's fingers tightened on the table. She had spent months bringing these men down. And now, they wanted her to let the biggest fish go. She stared at Knox. Then, she smiled. Knox blinked. Maya sat down, her voice calm and cutting. "You really think I'd be stupid enough to take this?" Knox's confidence faltered. Maya leaned forward. "You're scared, aren't you?" Knox's smile froze. Maya continued. "You wouldn't be here if Grayson was winning. You'd be in court, laughing at the evidence, tearing my case apart." She pointed at the plea deal. "But instead, you're here, offering me a way out." Maya's eyes narrowed. "That means you know something I don't." Knox's jaw tightened. Maya smiled wider. "So tell your client," she whispered. "I'm coming for him." Then she stood and walked out, and she didn't look back. One final move. That night, 11:45 p.m., Maya stood outside a secure safe house, staring at the man inside, Luis Ortega, the only honest cop inside Mather's network. The only witness left who could destroy Grayson completely. Maya stepped inside. Ortega looked exhausted. "You came," he muttered. Maya sat across from him. "I need your testimony." Ortega sighed. "You know they'll kill me if I testify, right?" Maya held up a folder. Inside were documents, a new identity, a secure relocation plan. "I can protect you," she said. Ortega stared at the papers for a long moment. Then, he nodded. Maya exhaled. They had one last chance. If Ortega testified, it would be over. Grayson would fall. Mathers would rot in prison. The system would finally crack. And Maya, she would win. The final verdict. 1 week later. Federal courtroom. The city held its breath as the judge prepared to deliver his ruling. Maya sat at the prosecution's table, her heart pounding. Ortega had testified. Mathers had been found guilty. But Grayson, he sat across from her, calm as ever, waiting. The judge cleared his throat. "The court finds the defendant, Jacob Grayson." A long pause. Maya held her breath. Then, "Guilty on all counts." The room exploded. Gasps. Reporters scrambling. Maya closed her eyes. Grayson's face twisted for the first time. He turned to lock eyes with her. And he smiled. A quiet, knowing smile. A promise. This isn't over. Maya stared back. Bring it. Because corruption might adapt. But so did she. The war wasn't over. But tonight, justice had won. The gavel's echo still lingered in the courtroom. Guilty on all counts. It was over. Jacob Grayson, the untouchable tycoon, the man who had built an empire on corruption, was finally convicted. Maya Carter sat motionless, her hands folded in front of her. She had spent months hunting men like him, Mathers, Ellis, Monroe. But Grayson had been the real prize. Yet, as the courtroom erupted into chaos, as reporters rushed out to break the news, she didn't celebrate. Because across the room, Grayson was smiling. A slow, calculated, knowing smile. Maya met his gaze. This isn't over. That's what his eyes told her. And she believed him. Aftermath. 24 hours later, Internal Affairs Headquarters. The city had been set ablaze with headlines. Fall of an Empire. Chief Mathers and Business Tycoon Grayson Vrojichi to Justice. Sergeant ELS Sentnced to 25 years for abuse of power and evidence hero or reveal. Maya Carter's CRUSADE. He's law enforcement to its core. Maya scrolled through the articles, her expression unreadable. She had won. The city was already talking about reforming the police force, about new laws to prevent corruption, about protecting whistleblowers. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a warning. Rucker stepped into her office, tossing a file onto her desk. "You should be celebrating," he muttered. The bastard's going away for life. Maya picked up the file. It was Grayson's final court statement. She skimmed it, stopping at one sentence. Prison is temporary. Influence is permanent. Her blood turned to ice. She set the file down. How long until he appeals? Already filed, Rucker said grimly. But we have enough evidence to hold. Maya nodded. But in her gut, she knew Grayson wasn't a man who went down quietly. He was already plotting his next move. A city on edge. 1 week later, outside federal prison, Maya stood by her car, watching from a distance as a convoy of armored vehicles transported Mathers, Ellis, and Grayson to separate facilities. The sun was setting, casting the city in deep orange hues. It should have felt like justice, but it felt like a warning. Lisa leaned against the car beside her. "Think this is really the end?" she asked. Maya exhaled. "It's never the end." Lisa studied her for a moment. "And what about you?" Maya looked out at the city skyline. For months, she had chased justice, fought against a system that had tried to silence her, frame her, destroy her. Now, she had won. But what came next? Lisa nudged her. "You know, they're talking about promoting you." Maya frowned. "For what?" Lisa smirked. "For cleaning up the city." Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah," she muttered. "Then why does it still feel dirty?" The final move. Midnight. Private safe house. Maya was poring over case files, trying to close the last loose ends, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed the show." Her blood ran cold. Unknown number. "You think a guilty verdict means you've won." Unknown number. "Power never disappears, Carter. It just moves." Her fingers tightened around her phone. A final message came through. Unknown number. "You've made enemies. And enemies never forget." Maya slowly set her phone down. She looked out the window, watching the city breathe. It was over. But it wasn't. Because corruption didn't die, it adapted. And now, it had a new target. Her. Maya exhaled. And then, she smiled. "Bring it."